Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our third webinar in our series about fueling NGSS mastery. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can support sense-making practice within the classroom. And we are super excited to get started here. My name is Emily Miller. My pronouns are she, her. I was a high school chemistry teacher for 10 years. And during that time, I taught in our alternative learning program, regular chem, honors chem. So I had lots of opportunities to teach a lot of different kids with a lot of different strategies. I was an NGSS pioneer and advocate within my science department. And I also had the pleasure of being a PLC lead. So I got to lead a lot of data-driven dialogue, which I love. And now I have the joy of partnering with districts to help them implement InnerOrbit. And as I discussed, as much as I'm looking forward to this evening, I cannot handle spicy foods. Not that I don't like them, just like literally can't handle them.
I completely get that. And hello, everybody. My name is Julia Monta. I was a teacher and tutor for elementary students in the Dominican Republic some time ago. But now for the past 4 years, I've actually been supporting teachers and districts with their NGSS implementation. And I've been partnering and providing guidance to schools and districts implementing assessments in their NGSS instruction with InnerOrbit. I really like Mexican food, and that's my fun fact. I can take spicy Mexican food. Other foods, I have respect for them. So yeah, I'm really excited to show you what we'll be talking about today in our webinar about supporting sense-making practice in the classroom. And today our goal is to explore how InnerOrbit activities, and these activities you can also use without InnerOrbit, but how you can support students sense-making in everyday classroom instruction by engaging with 4 practical low-stakes strategies that help build confidence and deepen understanding outside of formal assessments. So we're going to be here for about 30 minutes. And first of all, as we always do, we're just going to tell you what is InnerOrbit in case you're not necessarily very familiar with it. Then we're going to define sense-making practice. And actually, I'm going to pass it on to Emily to those sense-making practice activities, where she's going to talk to us about questions of the day, maybe sense-making SCP practice problems. We're also going to talk about science talks, phenomena transfer stations, and finally, what we could do next. And then we're going to wrap up. So it's a phenomenal agenda. It's very packed today, so I'm really excited to get us started. And now, what is InnerOrbit? If you're not familiar with it, InnerOrbit provides high-integrity 3D NGSS assessments that give us meaningful and actionable data. So we'd start with phenomena that anchor every assessment so that learning feels relevant and authentic, and that students can make sense of novel scenarios. From there, our platform delivers thoughtfully designed 3D assessments that let students demonstrate what they know and how they think, not just what they memorized. And finally, educators and districts get powerful reports that surface 3D learning data aligned to science tests and helping them make informed decisions and track NGSS proficiency. We also make the NGSS accessible for both you and your students through innovative approaches to sense-making. With our uniquely scaffolded one-dimensional, two-dimensional, and three-dimensional questions, educators can design any type of assessment for their classroom data and their needs. So additionally, InnerOrbit is continuously adding more ways to help educators turn assessment data into action, really. And then finally, we empower science educators with guidance, supporting resources, and professional development to help you reach your NGSS goal, like this session that we're in here today. And as NGSS assessment leaders, we share best practices through webinars, personalized account support, and professional development that'll help you build a strong foundational understanding of 3D assessment. Now, what we're here for today is to talk about defining sense-making practice and sense-making practice activities in the classroom. So let's actually dive into what are specifically those sense-making activities. So when we talk about implementing 3-dimensional assessments, we know it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all journey. And that's why at InnerOrbit, we support educators with 3 different tailored pathways of what we call these assessment orbits, designed to help you build towards full NGSS proficiency, no matter where your team is starting. So we've hosted webinars already on common assessments and individual assessments, but today we're zooming out a bit and focusing on sense-making practice. And this is a very powerful entry point for introducing students to 3-dimensional thinking without the pressure of scoring or grading. So these practices are really mostly designed to help students make sense of new phenomena while giving teachers a low-stakes way to observe student thinking and spark discussion. So if your team is just beginning with your NGSS assessment journey, or maybe they need some flexibility or quick feedback in the moment, this might be the orbit for you to start with. And now, talking and defining sense-making practice a little bit further, this is a structured activity, or these are structured activities designed to help teachers meet specific instructional goals by guiding students to explore and discuss phenomena, three-dimensional questions. So what makes these practices so powerful is that they're low stakes and flexible, giving teachers space to build their own comfort with facilitating and observing student sense-making without necessarily the pressure of formal assessment. And the goal overall is to help students build that resilience when making sense of complex ideas instead of shutting down. Because we know this, sometimes students are presented with these assessments and it's like, oh, but we never learned about this in class. Maybe these things are unfamiliar to them. So that they learn how to ask questions, collaborate, and stay engaged with the process. Now, I want us to take a moment and reflect, and I'm going to launch a poll here. Asking you if you feel like your students could benefit from sense-making practice prior to assessment. So there are some answers here that could be fitting to your scenario. Maybe your students need some practice before being exposed to formal assessment, or maybe your students are already exposed to formal assessment, but you still need additional collaboration opportunities for sense-making in the classroom. Cool. Now, talking a little bit more about sense-making practice and what it is, it's helpful to think about this when the orbit is from the right starting point for a classroom or for a team. So sense-making activities give educators a structured but flexible way to introduce new phenomena and three-dimensional thinking. So they're especially powerful when students are still building the confidence to share their thinking out loud when our team is experiencing how to facilitate meaningful three-dimensional discussions. So let's pause and reflect. Some questions that we can ask to understand if sense-making practice is the real and the best orbit for us to choose. First, are students still getting used to engaging in sense-making conversations? Is our team looking for a lower stakes way to introduce three-dimensional thinking? Do we need tools that allow us to try new phenomena without committing to a full assessment? Or is our team feeling a little hesitant about jumping straight into full three-dimensional assessment? And again, if your students are making sense of new phenomena, this are not necessarily used and as familiar with making sense of new phenomena, this might be the orbit where we want to start. So if you answered yes to any of these questions, then maybe this is a better place for you to start. And now today in our webinar, we're going to go over 4 specific sense-making practice strategies or activities. We have our question of the day, we have SCP practice problems, we have the science talks, and then phenomena transfer stations. Now, before we dive into those, I would like to give you a little bit of a refresher on NGSS assessment terminology. So unlike traditional standards that focus on isolated facts, as a refresher, a performance expectation usually tells us what students should actually be able to do to demonstrate their understanding. And every PE integrates 3 different dimensions of the NGSS. We have the DCI, the SCP, and science and engineering, the cross-cutting concept. So all these 3 together make a performance expectation. And you can see in the example that we'll see below how all 3 of these dimensions come together into one performance-based outcome. So students aren't just recalling facts, they're actually making sense of phenomena and showing their thinking and actions by applying what they know, which is the DCI, the science content, with the science and engineering practice that reflects how scientists work and think. And finally, the cross-cutting concepts, which are the big ideas that help students connect learning across domains. And that's the heart of three-dimensional assessment and instruction. And now that we know what a performance expectation is, let's talk about how we assess it. So to truly meet a performance expectations, students need to answer questions that integrate all 3 dimensions of the NGSS. And we call these 3-dimensional questions because they require students not just to know science, but to do science and think like scientists. But getting students to that point takes intentional scaffolding. And that's where one-dimensional questions and two-dimensional questions come in. So a one-dimensional question focuses on just one dimension. In this case, it's content knowledge. So we're just focusing on the DCI. A two-dimensional question, we'll see that it brings in 2 dimensions, like the content and the practices, or the content and the cross-cutting concept. And finally, the 3-dimensional questions integrates all 3, requiring students to apply their knowledge, use scientific thinking, and connect ideas across different concepts. So using this progression, 1D to 3D, 1D to 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional, not only supports students in building deeper understanding, but it also gives educators a clear pathway to develop sense-making skills over time. Now, with this foundation already built, Emily is actually going to walk us through the 4 different strategies that we're here to talk about today.
All right. Thank you so much, Julia, for just giving us an understanding of like what sense-making practice is in terms of like our assessment orbits, as well as doing that nice little review of the NGSS, because it's a little bit of an alphabet soup, alphabet soup. So it's nice just to make sure we're all on the same page there. So at InnerOrbit, we have 4 different activities that we would like to share with you today that kind of fall under this sense-making practice orbit that we were discussing. And the first is the question of the day. So question of the day is when you give students one question each day, question of the day, about a single inner orbit phenomenon. And the idea with this is that you're actually going to slowly scaffold the questions. So the first question that you would present to them will actually be like a lower level prior knowledge question. And then each day the questions will build up in rigor. So students can kind of slowly build up on the skills that they're learning throughout the week and throughout the unit. This is really nice if you want to kind of establish a sense-making routine within your classroom. So if you essentially say like every week, we're going to tackle a phenomena and we're going to tackle one question a day, it gives students a lot of opportunity to have exposure to phenomena as well as all of those different 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional questions. This is also a really nice way to review for a summative assessment. Let's say you have a mastery benchmark, or you have a final exam, or maybe you want to help prepare students for a state science test. And so for the first 5 minutes of the day or the last 5 minutes of the day, whether it's a bell ringer or an exit ticket, you take some time to slowly work on those different assessment strategies with those different types of 3-dimensional questions and 2-dimensional questions. So I wanted to show you a little bit what this could look like on InnerOrbit. So the first thing you would want to do is select one focus performance expectation. So one focus PE or standard. And then from there, you're going to go ahead and build a 5-question assessment on InnerOrbit. And then you will assign one question a day. So for example, I might pick the standard MSLS 2-1, and the phenomena that I'm picking is about Condor, the Condor cleanup crew. And then what I would do is maybe follow a schedule like this, where on Monday, I would ask my students a simple 1-dimensional prior knowledge question. So just to give you a little bit of context, a prior knowledge question is a question that's actually assessing DCI content knowledge from the earlier grade brand. So since this standard is MS, so middle school, LS21, this prior knowledge question is actually assessing content from an elementary grade level band. These are really nice to ensure that your students actually know what they should know before you got to teach them what they need to know. So this is a way just to kind of like test the waters and make sure we're on track. Then maybe on Tuesday, you could level up and it would still be a 1-dimensional question, so still just content, but now we're actually focusing on that middle school standard content. So we're kind of leveling up from something that they should have learned and should have known to something that they are now currently learning. Now, this is where the scaffolding really takes place, where you start layering in those other dimensions within the question. So one day you could ask a 2-dimensional question just purely focusing on the cross-cutting concept, which in this case is cause and effect. And then another day you could focus on the SEP, which is analyzing and interpreting data. So giving students opportunities to isolate these 2 skills can help them build confidence with them before, on Friday, you throw everything all together in one question. So in order to answer this question, students would need to be able to understand ecosystems, analyze and interpret data, and think about cause and effect. So whether you are doing review for a larger test or just want to build this as a daily routine within your classroom on your current unit, this can be a nice way, again, to not formally assess your students, but give them practices with sense making. So you can either do this as a class, they can do it alone on their device, like within the InnerOrbit assessment, but there's a lot of different ways to kind of make this work, again, to get that low stakes opportunity. The next activity I wanted to talk to y'all about is our SEP practice problems. So our SEP practice problems are science and engineering practice problems that solely focus on the SEP. So what we've done is we've removed from the question any grade level concepts or vocabulary or content knowledge. So we're really, rather than trying to incorporate ecosystems while they're analyzing, interpreting data, We just want to see if they can analyze and interpret data without trying to like layer on that new information on top of it. This is really nice if you want to gather some insights on your students' science proficiency. So this could actually be a really great like diagnostic opportunity if you just want to see how your students are doing on the SCP before you launch into a new unit or a new course. This could also be really nice if you want to practice a particular SCP before a particular lab or activity. So if you want to just take some time to like talk about analyzing, interpreting data before they go and collect a bunch of data that they need to then talk about, this could be beneficial in that way as well. And this usually takes about 15 minutes. So like I mentioned, this could be a diagnostic in order to like assess proficiency before moving forward, or as like a pre-lab or pre-unit activity. So what this would look like is first you would need to pick the SCP that you would want to practice with your students, and then you would build an assessment using these SCP practice problems. So on InnerOrbit, we actually have a tile right on our like front build page. So once you make an account and you're right in that build page, there's a tile called SCP practice problems. When you click into that, you can then select your grade level band, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school, and then you can look and see what problems we have for all of the different SCPs. So let's say you want to spend some time focusing on developing and using models. You could then pick a phenomena, and this one has models, surprisingly. It's about modeling. And if you look at these questions, this really isn't, we're still tying it to a phenomena. We still want to add meaning behind what we're asking students. We don't want to just say, like, what part of the model is this? So we still want to tie it to something relevant, but there's nothing as far as like ecosystems, there's nothing like um, as far as like reproduction or any other content knowledge that students would need in order to answer these questions. Really, in order to answer these questions, they need to be able to look at and interpret these models and think about how they would manipulate and change these models. So our SCP practice problems are a fabulous way, again, to kind of informally assess and give students practice with just the SCPs, whether you're trying to figure out what they know before you dive into something, or to give them some practice before launching into a specific activity. The next sense-making practice activity we want to talk about is called Science Talks, and I really like this one. This is a really great introductory sense-making practice activity. So like if you're really like, I don't even know if my students know what a phenomenon is or like what three-dimensional learning is, this is a really good starting point. The goal of a science talk is to have students engage in a facilitated discussion around a novel phenomena. So rather than throwing them out there on their own, you as the teacher are leading them in a group discussion about a phenomena, and then also looking at some two-dimensional and three-dimensional questions as well. So again, rather than putting them on their own and saying, okay, go answer this by yourself, we're now having a class discussion on how would we tackle this problem? What do you notice about this question? This does take a little bit longer, so this would be about like 20 minutes. And this would be really nice, maybe like in the middle of a unit where you want to explore a new phenomena with your students. So giving them an opportunity to kind of practice transferring what they've learned to a new situation. This could also be really nice if you just want to introduce InnerOrbit in a really low stakes environment. So rather than being like, all right, log on this, you're taking an assessment, let's go. This is like, all right, guys, we're all just going to try this out together, have a discussion, and then you can get more familiar with the platform. So what this looks like is you would pick a phenomena within InnerOrbit, and then you would select like 3 2D or 3D questions, and then you would go ahead and facilitate the science talk. So what we have provided here at InnerOrbit is actually a template to help you organize and facilitate this discussion. So the idea would be to kind of initially do like a think, pair, share as far as what do you notice happening with the phenomena? What are you wondering? Just to kind of get their brain kind of cooking initially. And then from there, we want to kind of walk them through how we would initially start tackling these two-dimensional and three-dimensional questions. So like, what is this question asking you to do? What is the first step you could take when you're trying to answer this question? And then you could have students kind of group together and try to pick a best answer. And like, why did you pick that? What was your thought process? You could have some students share out to the group. And this gives a really nice chance for not only you as a teacher to kind of informally assess how they're doing, but then it also gives an opportunity for other students to see sense making being modeled to them. A couple of tips or tricks that can help with this. It could be really nice if you actually project the phenomena and the questions like up on the board. So if like you log into your InnerOrbit account, and if you could then reflect that up on your board, that way you can kind of like keep everybody together within a class discussion. You could also then still have students following along on their devices. So if they have an assessment built, they could be independently reading the phenomena on their device if you have one-to-one devices. And then you could also have it up on the board as well to have students like come back if you're pointing something out to them. And then it'll also be nice to have this template in front of you so you can record your observations as students are talking. So you've got something to look back and reflect on after the discussion is over. Let's say you thought that was a fabulous idea and you want to go ahead and implement some science talks in your classroom. I just wanted to take a minute just to highlight all of the different phenomena that we have on InnerOrbit and all the different questions we have. I also wanted to just kind of throw out a reminder that we actually service grades 3 through 12. So whether you are working with third graders or you're working with high schoolers on these complex, physics or chemistry ideas, we have phenomena and questions that span all of those different levels. And so if you are potentially interested in trying out InnerOrbit, please feel free to fill out this interest form that Julia just dropped into the chat. Filling out this form is essentially just letting us know that you're interested in learning more, and then we'll have somebody from our team reach out to you and contact you and talk about different ways that you could actually try out and implement InnerOrbit and see if it's something that fits your needs. And you could even try one of these science talks in your classroom while you're trying it out as well and see if it has the impact and gives the students that sense-making practice you might be looking for. All right. And then the very last activity we're going to be talking about today is another one of my favorites called phenomena transfer stations. So a phenomena transfer station is when you have student groups walking through stations, and each station is going to have a new phenomena and a new set of 3D questions. Students are going to be working together in a group to answer these questions and discuss, and they're going to work on collaborating while trying to make sense of this new phenomenon. We want to be able to help transfer what they've learned in class to new phenomena, because really at the end of the day, that is NGSS mastery. Taking what you've learned in the classroom and being able to apply it to a new novel situation. Now, this activity is a little bit more time consuming, so something to keep in mind. This would be great as like a review activity at the end of a unit to help explore new phenomena. So you've given students opportunities to learn your lessons, learn the content, practice the SCP, and maybe you've had an anchoring phenomena throughout the whole unit that you've been modeling and using. Phenomena transfer stations is now a great way in order for students to then go, okay, now can I take what I've learned and not talk about maple syrup, but I could talk about what's in worm poop. I don't know why that's the phenomena on our site I always reference. I really need to pick a new one other than the worm poop one. So what would this look like? You would pick a focus performance expectation or a focus standard, and then you would go ahead and select different phenomena on our site. Every performance expectation, every standard on InnerOrbit has anywhere from 4 to 7 different phenomena. So you have so many different options in order to create these phenomena transfer stations. And then what you're going to do is you're going to put one phenomena at each station. You could either put a device at each station. So like if you've got laptops like a laptop cart you could rent out for the day, you could put that at each station, or you could print out these InnerOrbit assessments and place these at the stations. And then the idea behind this is, again, you're picking one standard, but you're going to pick different phenomena for that one standard. So maybe at the first station, students are going to go and answer questions about why does this wax stop smelling so good? So again, we're looking at 5 PS1, 2. And then when they move to station 2, now they're going to answer questions about why does water disappear from this pot? It's the same standard, and they're still going to be using the same DCI, the same SEP, and the same CCC, but looking at a completely different phenomena. So regardless of if it's wax or water, can we use mathematics and computational thinking? Can we look at this through the lens of scale, proportion, and quantity? And then they could pop over to the third station and talk about leaves leaving the forest floor. And then the fourth station, they can go and figure out about popcorn and gaining weight. And really, you can help students realize it doesn't matter what the question is about. It doesn't matter if we haven't talked about popcorn or wax or leaves. What we've learned in class can be transferred to these brand new phenomena. And once you've mastered what we've been learning, you should be able to apply this anywhere. And honestly, that's what, at least for me as a science teacher, that's what I want to do. Go out in the world, take what I've taught you, and apply it to these new situations that you are going to be tackling and seeing in your day-to-day life, like popcorn. All right. What we're going to do now, so those were our 4 sense-making practice activities that can be implemented with InnerOrbit. You could also do a modification of them without InnerOrbit, of course, but we want to just kind of review a little bit what we discussed and give you all a kind of a chance to reflect and see which one of these potential activities could be useful for you and your students. So that first activity we talked about was question of the day. And for question of the day, this is where you do 1 question each day, and the questions will progress in rigor throughout the week. So starting with like a prior knowledge question and building up to 3-dimensional questions. This is really great if you want to establish a sense-making routine or reviewing for a particular standard or unit. Then we talked about our SCP practice problems. These are questions that focus solely on the SCP, so no DCI or no CCC. And this is great if you want to assess proficiency on SCPs or if you just want to prep for certain labs or activities. The next activity we talked about was science talks, and this is where you have a classroom discussion about a phenomena and some questions tied to it. This is great if you want to model and give examples of sense making within that group environment. And then the very last one we just talked about was the phenomena transfer stations, where students explore different phenomena about the same PE, and this gives them a chance to really practice sense making and applying it to those new novel situations. So whether you need to get more comfortable with sense making in general and you need to start with practice, or you and your team are aligned with curriculum and time and you're ready to dive into common assessments to gather some really actionable data, regardless of where you're at, we are here to support you. We have also hosted 2 other webinars on those other orbits. You can find those on our YouTube channel. And speaking of which, Julia will go ahead and close us out for today.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We've done so much in just 30 minutes. So if you're interested in piloting InnerOrbit and you haven't done so, I encourage you to fill out this interest form. I'll drop again in the chat. If you want, we'll be in touch very, very soon, depending on the things that you wrote and with more details for you to actually try InnerOrbit on your own for free. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. We really appreciate your presence. And we know some of you have been here throughout this whole webinar series, and we really appreciate it too.